And so if you hear the term myelinated neuron, it means that it has a myelin sheath created by these Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system. There's another cell that does this exact same thing in the central nervous system. I'll talk about that in just a second. So the impulse, the bioelectric impulse, which is the message, right, that needs to be sent, will be sent in one direction along the length of the axon, so away from the cell body towards the next neuron. And so here, since we have two neurons synapsing together, this neuron, which is before the synapse, would be called the presynaptic neuron. And then this one, which is receiving the message from the presynaptic neuron, would be the postsynaptic neuron. And so the dendrites and the cell body are both capable of receiving stimuli. So you'll see that the ends of the axons, these synaptic knobs, are synapsing with both dendrites and the cell body. They would receive the stimulus, decide what it means and how to respond, and then that message, once decided, would be sent along the length of this axon to possibly another neuron or to an effector. Now, you can classify neurons based on their function as well as their morphology or structure. And so this one, which is the type that we just saw in the previous slide, this is called a multipolar neuron. And almost all multipolar neurons will be motor neurons carrying out motor information. It's called multipolar because we have here our cell body and there's multiple processes coming off of the cell body, so multipolar. Here's the cell body. These smaller processes, these are all dendrites, the receiving end. And then this long singular process, this is the axon where information would be coming off in this direction. And then it can give off many collaterals, right? And these collaterals can all synapse with multiple other neurons. And these ends would be synaptic knobs. Now, this one right here, this is a bipolar neuron, bi meaning two, because here's the cell body, and there are two main processes coming off of the cell body. This process right here, this would be the dendrite. It does branch into multiple other dendrites. This is the receiving end, and information is being sent to the cell body, right? The cell body would decide what that information means and how to respond, and then that information would be sent along this other process, which is the axon, right? Bipolar neurons are almost always sensory neurons, and these are found in special senses like the eyes, ears, and nose. Unipolar neurons are also primarily sensory, and it's unipolar because we have this cell body and only one, even though it's very short, we have one process coming off of it. And it does split into two, and so we have what's called this. The reason why this is called a peripheral axon is because this part of the neuron would actually be located in the peripheral nervous system. Here are the dendrites, the receiving ends, sent along this axon to the cell body, and then out again towards this, away from the cell body in this central axon. And the central axon would actually be located within the central nervous system, or be headed in directly into the central nervous system, and then these ends would synapse. And then primarily unipolar neurons are also sensory information. Neuroglial cells. So here's our neuron right here, okay? It's axon coming off. So this is contained within the brain or spinal cord, right? And some of the neuroglial cells are supporting cells. This cell right here, which is called an astrocyte, and it's called astrocyte because it looks star-shaped, multiple processes coming off of it. And you can see that we have processes connected to a capillary and then others connected to a neuron. And so the astrocytes actually help maintain the blood-brain barrier. And so they maintain ionic composition. They help regulate which substances from the blood actually get to the neurons of the central nervous system, help metabolize glucose. So they help like a nutritive function as well as maintaining that blood-brain barrier. Here this cell, which also looks somewhat star-shaped, but you can see that its multiple processes come and wrap around axons. This is an oligodendrocyte. Same function as a Schwann cell, but this is within the central nervous system. And whereas a Schwann cell in the peripheral nervous system wraps around only one axon, one oligodendrocyte in the central nervous system can have a process wrap around this axon, and then another process wrap around this axon. So it myelinates multiple axons. And then each process would come and again form that myelin sheath, which makes these areas where myelin is present incapable of conducting an electrical impulse. And so we have what's called that saltatory conduction, or jumping of the impulse from node to node, speeding up the conduction. So same function as the Schwann cell, but a little or very different structurally. These cells are here, which are much smaller. These are microglia, microglia or microglia right here as well. Those are neurons. These over here, these are microglia. Micro, very small, but also think microorganism. Microglia act as macrophages, and what they do is they go around and engulf unwanted cellular debris or pathogens, bacteria that might be within the central nervous system. So they act as little garbage collectors. Ependymal cells, these, you can see that they're somewhat cuboidal in shape and they have cilia attached to them. Ependymal cells line specialized capillaries in the ventricles of the brain. Ventricles are spaces within the brain that produce cerebral spinal fluid. Ependymal cells line the capillaries that produce CSF and actually help maintain composition, so they only allow certain substances through them to become a part of the cerebral spinal fluid, and the cilia will help with the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid throughout the ventricles of the brain. You've seen this image before on exam 1, and it's popping up again. Now you'll know exactly what this is. A multipolar neuron. So here's our cell body, multiple processes coming off of it. You don't have to be able to tell me what is a dendrite, what is the axon. Just be able to tell me this is a multipolar neuron. All of the little nuclei that you see surrounding it, those would all be neuroglial cells, and most likely would be the microglia. Okay. And multipolar neurons are motor neurons. These are sensory neurons. And we'll talk about reflexes at the beginning of next class, and I'll show you like where you find these specifically. But if you want to look for these on a slide, you'll pull out a spinal cord slide, and you're going to look at the dorsal root ganglion to see these sensory neurons. But look much more circular in shape versus these multipolar neurons. Now these cells that are directly surrounding the sensory neurons, these are called satellite cells. These are also a form of neuroglial cells found in the peripheral nervous system, which all of these are found within the central nervous system. Schwann cells and satellite cells are the neuroglial cells found in the peripheral nervous system. Satellite cells, the functions are not well known, but they're thought to be nurse cells or help support, maintain, nutrient balance for the central nerve, or for the sensory neurons found here. Okay, so they have a supportive function, but they're not very well known.